careful of. The Constitution says that you essentially cannot appropriate money through a ballot question. And so that's one pitfall. So you have to first begin to focus on the formula, and even that would have to be very narrowly crafted. And the only difficulty I see with that is trying to explain it to the public. If you're trying to do a formula change, it's hard enough for us to explain it to our colleagues when we try to do it. But you know, I wouldn't rule that out. I would just say you'd have to really thread the needle in terms of what the question is. But as to your original point, you're absolutely right. The communities that feel that they have something to lose are going to fight any kind of a change. And that's why we've always said historically that to make a change, you need to add money to the formula. So you at least hold everyone where they're at, and then add. Now that grates on some people because they say, well, if it's an unfair formula, why should we preserve that unfairness? Well, as a political reality, it's a means to an end, and we have to get to that other point. So if we sprinkled some more money on the formula and held everyone harmless and then went forward, that would be a way to do it. It is enormously difficult. A number of years ago, Senator Tassay and I looked at the entire formula and we rewrote it. And in fact, to my surprise, the Boston Herald, the day we offered it, gave us their lead editorial saying it was the right way to do it. And we couldn't get the votes to get that passed. So it's enormously difficult to change the formula. So having a coalition is important. I mean, I think Brad and I would agree that one of the things that got the Reform Act of '93 done was the Business Alliance for Education, a group of people that said the status quo was unacceptable. The business community is a powerful ally, and they have a reason to want to change how education is done. Certainly folks have resorted to lawsuits in the past. I would suggest to you, I think the question that they ask is always the wrong one, and that's why we haven't had the kind of results people would think we would get. And there's continuing to lobby, but trying to get an objective measurement of is this fair and is this adequate has got to be central to all that, because that makes your case. But it would be difficult, not impossible, to do a ballot question.
It just seems, you know, we can't really affect a lot of the, you know, get those people out of office that aren't voting. You know, they directly impact what we get in North Reading. You know, obviously we can vote you in, but if you're not able to affect that change because you're not.
Well, I mean, at the risk of irritating some of my colleagues who vote a little differently than me, you have 85, you know, chapters in how many communities do you know? Have those chapters as their legislators. Why did you vote against that? And explain why they voted against that. And if they should be able to explain the reason, it shouldn't be, well, the speaker told me to, or the chair Ways and Means told me to. I mean, the chairman, chair Ways and Means said to me, Brad, you have these people writing these letters. I said, yeah, they're writing the letters for a reason, because they're concerned. And I said, you know what? I can say, look, firsthand, I can say, my daughter is going kindergarten 4 days a week now, and has Wednesdays off. I mean, you know, and I said, I think that's wrong. Never mind when you are there, the things that you don't get to do, or you may get to do once a month or twice a month, that you only get to do every week. So
it goes back to what you said, that North Reading benefits by being part of STAN because our voice is much louder.
Absolutely.
Can put pressure on those, you know, legislators that that may not necessarily listen to us.
well, they need to hear it. I mean, people think about it. I mean, you know, we pushed the $450 million, which was sort of all that we took back in 04, 05, and 06, and we had a vote on it in the House. We had a surplus last year that was about $450 million, and we spent it in a variety of areas, and we said, well, why don't we spend the $450 here? It's what we think we owe cities and towns. We had a vote on it, and the cities and towns were not happy about it. And you had the chair Ways and Means going out writing letters to the editor. We got a lot of editorial support, and a lot of media support. But it's having the local chapters go to their legislators and say, geez, you know, this seemed reasonable. Maybe, you know, 450. Let's say 450 was excessive. Now we came back with 150. So are you willing to do anything, or it's like, no, they came up with the numbers. I mean, the numbers essentially that were in the governor's budget is what you're going to get in terms of local aid. Albeit the lottery piece, he funded it with a piece of his gambling initiative. We just said we backfill it. You know, that pretty minimalist.
Are you, the $450 million you're talking about, is that from the rainy day fund? Okay, so House Doc is 4651.
Yes, which is still waiting in the Senate.
And that's you should understand that point. That is incredibly frustrating. That bill was filed and hasn't even been admitted for consideration by the House.
And that's basically, can I propose an idea? And tell me what's wrong with it. So.
Cliff Bowers, 24 Farm River. we are continually frustrated just like you are. Obviously, this is the choir and the preaching to the choir here. Or the other way around. But the upshot of it is, we need to know who the gatekeepers are. Now, we can probably research that, but my guess is you could write it down and leave it behind here for us. We need to get to the people in those communities and get those people out of office.
Or at least motivate them. You're absolutely right. You are
Out of
absolutely right.
office.
You can say that, I
I'm a
didn't.
technologist type person. Out of office.
I mean, the frustrating thing is, I mean, I can sit there and say, but here's unfortunately the political reality. I won't speak to the Senate because we, sort of, legalities is I'm not supposed to. Is you have two people who have a huge say in the House, are obviously the Speaker and the Chair of Ways and Means. But going to their communities and saying, throw the Speaker of the House out and replace them with somebody else, but the person who replaced them isn't gonna come in and be Speaker of the House. And obviously the Speaker has the ability to, they like having speakers, so it creates a dynamic challenge. So I would say not even though they're the gatekeepers, it's like in chess, if you can pick off a few of the pawns,
The enablers of the
gatekeepers
gatekeepers.
there we go.
You got it.
All right, I agree
The
with you.
people who vote for the gatekeepers.
See, that's
Those
where I
are
agree.
the ones we need to pick off. And it's spread out in a whole bunch of communities, and there's still the people who enable the gatekeepers, and we've got to get to the gatekeepers, so you got to get the enablers.
So are there a few enablers? Names?
Well, let's take a step back for a second. One of the important reasons for joining this organization is that as much as Brad and I agree with you, we only get to vote once. In other words, if we really agree with you, we don't get to vote twice. So well, we wish we could have more votes, but you've got to find communities who have a reason to say to their legislator, you need to do this because we have a similar interest. And that's where Brad and I get frustrated, because we oftentimes see members voting against what we think are the best interests of their own community because of what the gatekeepers are telling them. And so we need to, for instance, I'll give you a concrete example. We put together a list in my office of the 97 communities that are where they were at back in 02 and 03. Dan, I think we showed this to you at one point. And we attached to it legislators who represent those communities. And we passed that around so that people could call and say that. Because as much as we might love someone who's in a district that we don't represent, we don't work for them. We work for you. So when we get a letter from you, that's an instructive. Now, we might not always agree, but it carries a lot of weight. We need to get their constituents telling them, this is what you need to do because you work for us. And we can help you with that. But we need to identify what the issue is going to be that we're going to do the ask for, and then we need to mobilize. But it is incredibly powerful to do what you're doing with this group. Because you have a chance at getting to that other legislator with someone who they work for, making the pitch. Not Brad, not me, and not you, because if they don't represent you, they're not as interested. So, names, well, obviously, the presiding officers and the chairs of Ways and Means are the people that control this budget process.
They're the gatekeeper. I know, what Cliff's getting at is enablers. And, I mean, I would say you go to the legislative website and look up some of the votes and see how people vote. And
That's
you can
right.
say, well, share that with your people.
And what we'll do is get out, if we're going to do amendments, we'll get them out so you know in advance to do that lobbying. So someone can't say, I didn't know, I didn't hear. And you've got to get people in as many of these communities as you can to call their legislator and say, we want this. An adequacy study? Is that too much to ask for someone to call their legislator? I mean, it amazes me that we can't get that one moved. I mean, and that's a very simple ask for someone to pick up the phone and say, do you agree with me that we ought to understand if the state formula adequately funds education? And then if they don't, then Cliff, maybe, the darker side of your personality can emerge.
I will say, and I know it seems like it's frustrating, you said email the Senate President, but they come back and say something. And sometimes it may not mean that we get the exact response we want. But I mean, the fact is we get a local aid resolution 3 weeks earlier than we were. And obviously making sure that the lottery was going to be level funded was $167,112. of the puzzle that North Reading needed to hear this year. So it is important and it is helpful. It's frustrating at the sort of the glacial pace that it takes.
Excuse me, did I sound frustrated?
Not at all.
You've been frustrated for a while.
I'm not even elected yet.
All we're saying is that it's a multiple part process. We need a concrete ask, we need their constituents to put it in front of them, and then if they don't support it, we need to know why. That would make our jobs a lot easier, because it can't be just you hide behind the leadership and say, well, I don't know why I didn't do it. It has to be, well, maybe there's a reason, maybe there's not, but their constituents deserve to know the reason that they didn't do something that we think is logical.
I'll say something, like when I talked about the local aid resolution, we did the 40% on the MMA 40%. Part of my reason offering that is because I have a number of colleagues that go to MMA events or seminars, this and that, and talk about these great things. Well, it's like, well, here's now the time to put the follow through. You know, if this is a good idea, or you think it's a good idea to go to MMA and say, we should do this, well, Brad Jones is offering, you're gonna go for it. Well, no, I'm not gonna go for it. Well, then don't say one thing to MMA and then not follow through. And that was part of the council offering. You know, MMA talks about the 40%, we have colleagues that go and talk about what a wonderful job they're doing and this and that. And then it's like, well, you're gonna go for it. So no, they're not gonna go for it.
And I offered that amendment as well on our side.
You know,
Because it was one of those things where you get in a room and everyone would nod in assent, but then you go to the floor and you can't get the votes to pass it. Very frustrating.
JP, can you share the information that you brought?
Yeah, I'm going to take 2 minutes
Yeah.
because it somewhat doesn't talk directly to what we're talking about here.